All right, guys, we're live.
Looks like it.
All right, so to all the young people in the room, I guess you included, how long are we going to pretend like we got time? How long are we going to pretend that we can't do things because of certain people in our life circumstances, and just shit going on in the world? How long are we going to let people put us in a box that haven't walked in our shoes? Let me tell you something about a box. The only box that they're going to put me in is the one they put into a furnace. So until then, I'm going to live my life on my terms until they cook me. And even after that, my spirit somewhere will still be living off of my fucking terms. We've lived long enough off of what the last generation did. And that shit didn't work. Times have changed. Our lives have changed. And it's time we use different tools to dictate what our life's going to look like going forward. Which leads me into the topic for today.
But what are those tools that you're talking about?
Therapy, you start.
Right.
You know, we've spent way too fucking long in our own heads thinking our problems are so unique to ourselves. They're so special to me that I'll never give them up. Meanwhile, destructing everything else in your life, including the progress, including your success in life or where you want to be, internal happiness, you fucking name it. Our problems are not uniquely our own. And they may be unique, which require new and unique methods to fix them, but that doesn't mean they haven't been done before. The resources are fucking out there. How long are we going to drown in self-pity until we can't swim back to shore? Shout out to Gavin.
Right. So let's talk about this box in terms of roles or society creating things a certain way. When you're talking about therapy, what do you think boxes it out in terms of people box themselves into a box saying, hey, I don't need therapy, or I don't need counseling, or I'm supposed to live a certain way? Do you think it's others around us that create that? Do you think it's our parents that create that? Do you think it's just society at large that creates that?
I think it starts with that reflection in the mirror.
Right.
How long are we going to blame everyone else?
Right.
How long are we going to blame our community or society that, oh my God, my plight is so tough because society's just pushed me to... No, look at yourself in the fucking mirror. I think it starts with people not wanting to give up their issues because they are uniquely your own. It's almost a part of your identity.
Right.
You have to break up with your issues that you have. You have to break up with your old self. And how hard is a fucking breakup? It's impossible. Now try breaking up with yourself. Right. I think that's where the issue starts. Is we go through shit, go through trauma, and now it's ours. It's uniquely ours. And we don't even share it with other people. So we don't want to give it up because it's our little secret.
Right.
And I think from that is where some of the root causes start, where we don't want to give it up. Until it gets to a point where shit's about to blow. I'm, self-destructing now.
Right.
Substance abuse or whatever have you, just self-destructive behavior we see in people these days. And it overexpresses themselves, and then before you know it, you ever seen a forest once there's been a forest fire?
Yeah.
That's what people's lives become sometimes when they just let their trauma get too big for them, or their issues or whatever they're dealing with too big for them. You don't want to end up in a point where your life is so charred that you don't even know where to start building again.
Right.
Right?
So therapy. Let's talk about that. Have you had any experiences with therapy? And what do you feel? Because the way that you brought up therapy here is it almost goes against the status quo.
Absolutely.
As something outside of the box. How do people that you know, how do they perceive therapy, and how did you first perceive therapy? And when we're talking about therapy, we're talking about sessions with an RCC, registered
sitting with
clinical counselor, not a psychiatrist.
Yeah.
Right, that's a little different.
Yeah.
But when it comes to therapy, why don't you share some of your experiences, the outlook you had before going into it? I think that's really
I'll start
important.
there. So what I thought therapy was growing up was Tony Soprano, sitting there in front of his counselor, and his counselor always leading it back to him having a terrible relationship with his mom, and Tony always saying, "What do you think? I want to fuck my mom. What do you mean? Like, what do you mean these issues are?"
And he's talking to a psychiatrist.
He's talking to a psychiatrist,
like a doctor or whatever.
She's prescribed a medication.
Right.
And I thought that's exactly what it is, and boom, that shit is not for me. I'm not an Italian gangster as much as I pretend I want to be, right? But that's definitely not for me. I don't want to hear those things. As true as they may be, I don't want to fucking hear that shit. Because I got to deal with it. Then ignorance is no longer bliss. I have to deal with my shit. And I'm not ready. That was my first outlook.
So you thought this person was going to position things in front of you, bring things about from inside of you, out in front of you, and you were going to have to deal with it?
Exactly. That was my
that
biggest
scared
fear.
you?
That scared the shit out of me.
Okay.
Yeah. And then, even I don't think it really came up with my mom, but I would assume her things are like, if I were to bring up therapy, well, what the fuck's wrong with you? You a head case?
Right.
Tere dimag nu ki hoya?
Right.
Right? Like, can't you just go to the family doctor for medication? Like, what do you mean you need to see a therapist? Talk to me about your problems. It's like, what do you mean talk to you about my problems, mom? That's fucking impossible.
Yeah.
Right? My problems are so unique to me. I can't talk to them about with you. But hey,
so it brings out a red flag. It seems like just bringing it out is kind of like, oh, whoa, wait a minute, what the hell's going on?
Mm-hmm. But you know what? Even to say that, if I had maybe even started to talk to my mom about it, at least now things are becoming real. It's coming out. And if she's not the right person to talk to him about, at least it's a fucking start.
Right.
Right? And if it is a start, then from there I can go on to the next and the next. Right? Okay. But I still, after watching that first episode of Sopranos, the first episode, and it took me almost 11 years to go to therapy after that first little thing that I saw.
So let's fast forward to your very first day.
Yeah, to my very first day. First, let's talk about what even led me to therapy.
Yeah, okay, yeah. Before we got to the parking lot, let's figure out what got you there.
So when I first was introduced to therapy, I think you started going to therapy. Mm. And I kind of saw from afar that you were doing your thing. And, it was shout out to Anna, who was first just starting off as their therapeutic practice and stuff like that. So
they have to do practical hours.
They had to do hours.
She was doing it on 128 there.
You were able to get in with free for her.
Yeah,
yeah. Like, oh, that's cool. You're doing your thing. And then my dad died, and I never had a relationship with him. I never had to deal with any of the emotions with abandonment and the guilt of not letting my father see me. Or see my.
You dealt with the issues, you just never knew. Well, you had the issues.
I had the issues, right? But I never knew I had the guilt that was associated with that because I was such a proud, son of a single mom. Fuck that. My dad's abusive, alcoholic. That's where the buck stops. I don't give a fuck what the rest of the story is for him. At least I thought.
Okay.
And then he died.
Okay.
And I guess I had a little bit of me that thought I would get a chance at redemption, maybe when I'm 30, maybe when I'm 40, he's in his 80s, and I just, decide maybe I had that in my subconscious mind, and that gave me ease. Well, that got taken away from me. Now my guilt is real.
Back then, you thought you had time.
I thought I had time.
I was
pretending I had time.
Pretending I all the time.
I was living in that forest fire scenario. The forest was burning around me. I thought, okay. I'm going to be fine.
Yeah.
In a forest fire with a garden hose.
Right.
And so he passes away, and I have a full, you remember this vividly, a full mental breakdown.
Yeah.
Emotional fucking breakdown.
Yeah.
And everything that I was dealing with in the back of my head was boom, right here. Everyone that knew me knew I was not myself. Everybody that knew me or my clients and my people knew there was something wrong. But here's the scariest part. I was not approachable. I was not that type of person where you could say, hey, there's something wrong. We need to sort this out.
Yeah.
And that was my fault because I wasn't being vulnerable. I didn't, go out and ask for help. I was too much of a man to do that.
So right there. Like you didn't ask for help. You were too much of a man.
Hypermasculinity.
Yeah, right. Yeah. So you learned that from your father, would you say? Or just from observing Indian men in general?
Having to be a man at a very young age.
Gotcha. Okay.
Having to step up.
Yes.
Having to fill those shoes.
Right.
And with that, when no one's taught you.
So you were kind of boxing yourself into this role now, exactly. Right? Like, okay.
That's why I feel very strongly about that 2 feet wide box I'm going to be put in. That's the only fucking box I'm going to be put in.
Right.
And so when when you don't have a clear-cut blueprint of how it is, what it is to be a man and stuff like that, you create your own. So you take from film, you take from people around you, you take from not the best characters to mold yourself.
And rappers and things.
Everything, right? And so, that house of cards started to flop and started to kind of give way. And it was right out there, outside at the pond, when I first had, I'm notorious, I don't really cry. And You guys took me outside, and I barely made it to the pond, and I was just down on my knees and like weeping. And even then, when I was crying and it hurt and all that shit was going on, I didn't know what the root cause was. I didn't know it was the guilt. Now let's talk about the parking lot when I show up to therapy and you finally convince me,
Right.
just fucking show up.
So at some point, talks take place.
Yeah.
Your mind changes in terms of, okay, well, maybe I should go talk to this lady. And
It was a slew of things. It was you.
Yeah.
It was my wife.
Yeah.
My incoming marriage and the want and love for my wife to say she deserves a man that
Because at this point, you're with your girlfriend at the time for 13 years
13
now,
years
12 years or something.
yeah 12 years and I always felt like she deserved a stable mind as much as I deserved one, and I always knew what I wanted my life to look like after I was married, and I knew my current circumstance is not conducive for.
So you weren't just doing it for yourself, it seems. You were doing it more so for
Absolutely not. And as much as we like to say you have to do it for yourself and stuff like that, you can start by doing it for others.
I think that's what gets your foot in the door.
That's it, and that's okay.
Yeah.
But at some point, you have to circle back to doing it for yourself.
Otherwise, it's not going to be effective.
Doing it for others gets you to the party.
Yeah.
Doing it for yourself will keep you there and keep you right. It'll be your why, right?
Yeah.
So you convinced me. I book an appointment. I think it was for say 1:00. I show up there at 12:50. I'm in the parking lot. Even the whole drive there, I'm like, I don't know what the fuck I'm gonna say. I don't even know what the fucking point of this is. I could just deal with this myself. I'll just handle this myself. I don't fucking So sitting there. It's 1:05. Still in the fucking car. Still haven't mustered up the guts to walk up the fucking room to just talk to her, right? It's 1:15, and then it hits me like, oh fuck, well, I'd hate if I was late for someone was late for me. I can't be a hypocrite. Walk into this dimly lit room, and she's sitting at a table just like Sim's, or a chair just like Sim's sitting at, and the couch is like this, and she hears me come up and sits down. I apologize for being late, and then she's just like, "Tell me about yourself." And
That was it.
Waterworks, fucking.
That was the prompt.
Just started talking about. I circled around a bunch of stuff, talked about my wife, and it went right into my dad. And she brought out stuff in me, and here's how I see therapy. And this is the example I'll give you of that appointment. I rambled. I rambled like crazy, much like what I'm probably doing right now. But what she did was she took my rambling that was in the air. She took this, combined it. She's like,
Compartmentalized.
this is exactly. She compartmentalized it. She's like, this is a thought that you have. How valid is it now that it's real? Because the one thing she taught me is just because you're thinking it doesn't mean it's real until you say it and then analyze it back to say, okay, that is real. No, that's me tripping, right? So she took trimmed all the fat of all the tripping that I was doing, and she narrowed it down to two things. So she said that, one, it sounds like you're ready to forgive your dad. Can't do that physically, okay? That doesn't mean you can't do it. She taught me that this physical existence is just one part of our experience as human beings, as the spirit. So she asked me, she's like, well, this was actually, now I'm combining a couple of appointments, but in the gist of my therapy experience, she said that write a letter. Write a letter, and she's big on nature bathing, healing through nature. And she's like, write a letter to him as everything you would say to him as if you knew he just had a few days to live. Get it all off of your chest. Go to your favorite place in the watershed where we went. And she's like, leave it there. She's like, I know it's littering. It's fine. Dig it into the ground. If you really feel like you need to find, a biodegradable paper or whatever, leave it there. Because once you leave it there and you exit out, it's there and it's gone and you've done your part. She's like, second thing. So you talk a lot about forgiving your dad. You didn't forgive your mom. I couldn't even, I was damn near offended. Because that young boy in me that was a proud son of a single mom.
I forgive my mom. I've been protecting my mom for
That's what I've been
years.
doing.
I'm her knight in
Look
shining
at these
armor.
battle scars.
Right.
And she's like, yeah, you may have on the surface been strong for your mom. But she said that no matter what you say, she's like, you started off with saying your dad was your number one. You were your dad's sidekick. Mom decided to leave your dad. You sided with your mom. And she's like, when you did that, that little boy had a broken heart.
Oh, well, Batman lost his Robin, right?
Lost my Superman.
Yeah.
And so when she said that, I immediately realized all these little mannerisms I had with my mom, this passive aggressiveness that I've always had with my mom. And it all made sense. It all made sense of why I couldn't open up to my mom about certain things. Why I borderline had trust issues with my mom.
Right.
And she said that your work isn't done with just forgiving your dad. You have to work with one. She's like, you have a surviving parent. And she said that what you do, the true redemption of what's going on with these issues you have with your father, are going to, the redemption you're going to get is going to be through your mom.
Oh, that's quite the perspective.
Said long enough that you're a proud son of a single mom. Now fill those fucking shoes and act the part.
Right.
Which I don't feel like now in hindsight, I wasn't acting the part.
No.
I was showing the part.
Right. I'm going to ask you not to curse. Keep going. You're doing a great job.
Sorry.
We might have young listeners.
Yeah, sorry. That's I apologize. And
Should have said something.
yeah, and so then, began the process of, like calling my mom, texting my mom,
Right.
little things like that made me.
Did you find you could third person yourself at times? Like you'd be in the middle of the day, you'd be going in a hole like, oh my God, and you start feeling certain way, then all of a sudden you step back and be like, wait a
Sitting
minute.
right there.
You sit up here and just be like, wait, what's that going
Yeah.
on here? And I find that was kind of something that the counselors were able to equip us with. Now, going through your journey with that now, from when you started, from when you ended, what are the main takeaways, if you had any, or like, how did you feel after? What were some of the things like, you know what, she really helped me do this?
Okay, so
You mentioned the compartmentalizing part.
Yeah. One thing I think over just bird's eye view of therapy, the hardest part, no matter if it's your first appointment or your 10th appointment, the hardest part is just showing up.
Yeah.
It's much like a workout. I don't want to fucking do this, or I don't want to do this today. I can't do this today. But you go, you show up, and you feel so light.
How long are the sessions?
Hour.
1 hour.
You know what? I disregard that. It's as long as you want them to be.
Okay.
Up to an hour.
Up to an hour.
Right?
And does the hour go by quick, or is it like just nail biting and like
so quick?
Yeah.
Too quick sometimes.
Yeah.
And you're gonna sweat. You're gonna cry. There's gonna be long periods of silence. Sometimes we get awkward in conversation, and you gotta remember, it's not a conversation. It's about you. And
Yeah.
for some people that aren't, a ball about themselves, it's gonna be tough for you to talk about yourself. But it's all about you. So use that time.
It's kind of weird for us being Indian kids, right? Because it's like, why you man, right? So it's collectivism. It's about doing things for each other.
Yeah.
So when you're sitting in this room, you keep talking about yourself. At the end of it, you feel like you're doing something wrong.
Definitely.
You're like, oh, am I a selfish person? Like, am I supposed to? Should I have brought up the way that my mom feels?
Exactly. Yeah. Or even like just letting the cat out the bag about that. Like, how embarrassing it is for an Indian boy to realize that you have to forgive your mom for something you didn't even realize you were holding against her. Like the guilt you feel again. Oh, fuck, man.
I thought I was doing everything right.
Exactly.
And like now
and that's okay, because part of the human experience is realizing, yes, and man, what's right today may not be right tomorrow. What you've been doing for a while may have been wrong, but that doesn't mean that was all wasted time. This is shit you learned from.
Yeah.
It's stuff you learned from. And the second part that I would say is that it's not helping right away. It's not, I'm good, taking the blue pill, world's changed.
Mm-hmm.
It's much like it takes a year to unpack it, depending on how deep the wounds are.
Do you ever leave feeling worse than when you walked in?
Yeah, dude.
But thinking about that, if I don't know anything about therapy, I think I'm gonna walk out feeling so great. The lady's gonna take all my problems.
No.
Here's my baggage.
Yeah.
It's like you're dropping your laundry off. Right?
It may feel like
but
that
I didn't
at
know. Check it up.
It may feel like that at first, but then you start realizing that the work really starts once you leave.
So it's more like working out.
100%.
You have to put in effort.
Great analogy. Resistance. Mass amounts of it. Weight. Only difference is the weight gets taken off, not put on. And more so than anything, strength.
Yeah.
True strength comes from vulnerability. What better way to be vulnerable than sitting across from a counselor talking about your deepest, darkest issues? And that's the other thing. You're going to feel like your issues aren't really that big of a deal. You don't need to talk about them. Or you're going to feel like, I sound crazy right now. This probably isn't even making sense. That's probably when you're making the most sense. That's where the counselor gets your money's worth.
Yeah.
Just ramble if you have to. Even if you don't think it's going to make sense. Worst part about, I don't understand people that need to get prepared for therapy. Yes, take your notes, journal. Yes, of course, but do that in the moment, but not day night before you're. I want to talk about this. I want to talk about that. No, you already know what you need to talk about. Just
Right.
go there and ramble. Go there and just let her or him organize your thoughts and organize everything to tell you what's real, what isn't. Right? It takes time to build rapport with your therapist too, to get them to know you, of who you are, what you value, and then they can say yes, you're being true to your values and not true to your values. They got to get to know you first too.
Yeah, I really think that it's like very underutilized, this service, and especially when it comes to like counseling with RCCs and so forth. Now, as a kid growing up, I had anxiety, had depression, ADHD, and so all that stuff went under the radar. But then eventually it didn't. Eventually it started to come out, and I saw growing up, oh, mom would take anti-anxiety medication or or whatever, the antidepressants. So you're thinking, okay, well, maybe this is what's going to end up happening. End up at the doctor in 2011 or 12, ends up sending me to a psychiatrist. That was the worst experience ever. And that was just straight diagnosing you,
Right.
making you fill out these sheets and then telling you. The psychiatrist legit looked me in the eyes and said, due to the fact that depression runs so deeply in your family on your father's side and your mom's side, you have the genetic thing, and the environment you're in right now has kind of turned that switch on. And in my professional opinion, you're going to have to be on SSRIs for the rest of your life.
Wow.
That's what he said to me. He said, in order for you to live a normal life, you're going to have to be juiced up. He's like, we'll give you an anti-anxiety one, then we'll give you an SSRI, then we'll give you another one, and you'll take like a concoction of 3-4 pills.
Crazy.
I hated that. I said, I had gotten a huge argument with the guy and I left. My GP was stunned. He's like, that guy really said that to you?
Yeah.
He said, yeah, he did say that to me. And then he said, okay, well, we have to figure out other options because I don't feel comfortable with you doing that much medication either.
Yeah.
And slowly now I'm thinking, okay, there is no other option for this. And that's when I met Anna. And I got sent and I went to her and I says, okay, well, this looks like this is the option that many people need to be accessing, because instead of taking the medication, now you have this person to talk to.
Right.
You have the compartmentalizing of the thoughts. You have you're viewing your thoughts and trying to figure out, hey, what's going on? Why do I feel like that? Instead of just going to the doctor saying, they literally be like, oh, I'll give you 10 milligrams of Cipralex, it'll take the edge off.
Yeah.
Right. And I feel like anytime someone's in university, if they get stressed out, boom, right away, SSRIs. Instead, I think we need to start finding these RCCs that are doing a great job,
Right.
and find someone that works with you and try to work with them.
Break me down the timeline. So you see the psychiatrist approximately what year is that?
2012,
Okay, so what's that? Almost fucking 10 years ago?
about 9 years ago.
9 years ago?
Yeah.
So
I saw him and he got diagnosed with ADHD, OCPD, which is like a personality feature, which he just summed it up as some like perfectionism or something. And then he generalized anxiety disorder, ADHD, and then severe depression.
Yeah.
So he gave me like 4 or 5
2012 was, he got you at a very dark year. I remember
yeah,
2012.
it was a very, very bad year for me. And that's when he got me, and he kind of wrote that stuff out. Didn't work out with the psychiatrist, and the GP's like, well, what are you currently doing to kind of help you? And what I was doing was I was using cannabis. I was going out in nature, and then I was exercising. He said, continue with that.
Yeah.
I continued with it, and it worked for a short period of time until I went back into counseling in 2015. So from about 2012, it was bad. 2013 started getting better. 2014 was a good year. We opened up our facility and everything. And then 2015, I kind of went back down into the thing. And what the psychiatrist said to me, which did slightly ring true, he says, every about 6 years, you're going to have changes in your life or things that you're going to go through, which is now going to re-spark the depressive state or re-spark the anxiety.
So you got the one thing right.
Or re-spark this part in you, and and so forth, and you're going to have to deal with it. So yeah, 2012 was a bad year. And then a few years later, you have some more challenges and so forth. And that's when I ended up.
Actually, technically, your 6 years is coming up, buddy.
Hunker down, guys.
Hunker down.
No kidding,
This is
right?
coming.
It's about to come up.
Okay, so
Sorry, go ahead.
my point of the timeline was that he asked you, now most people go to a psychiatrist, SSRIs, boom, that's it, no questions asked, you got a PhD, I'm all in. You fought back. So not psychiatrists, not to say that all psychiatrists are bad, but you got to be critical of doctors when they're giving you medication and what they're giving it to you for. Not everyone is. You haven't been on SSRIs. You've gone on a journey to take your own mental health in your own hands.
Well, I took Cipralex for like 2 weeks, and it just wasn't agreeing with me.
Now, what was this?
I don't know. I felt like I was going kind of crazy.
Yeah.
Like your mood was getting. But what they tell you with SSRIs, it takes 4 weeks, I think, for them to even start working. So you have to take them for 4 weeks, and then it's just a slew of craziness because once you've been on them now for 3 months, you can't just automatically stop.
Right.
Now you have to wean yourself off of them.
Right.
So I just went 2 weeks on them. I just took myself off, and obviously that was a bad idea.
Yeah.
Because like I was going nuts. Like I was, my thoughts and everything, my mood, everything was all over the place. But sitting down in that first counseling session and having that person walk me through and talk me through a lot of this stuff was probably the most helpful.
Let's get into that. So, like, walk me through. Okay, so you prompted into going to therapy.
So now I'm going into therapy basically because I'm suffering from this anxiety, from ADHD, and things are going a little wild. And at that time, I think I got engaged. I got engaged, and it was one of those things where it was kind of like my ex-wife. She was like, "Okay, you should get help," right? And she didn't know much about it. And I was also like, I want to make sure I'm the best version of myself going into this and make sure that I'm equipped with all the right tools. So then I started seeing her in order to work on that. And that was basically leading up to getting married. Then got married. Then I continued on with the counseling on my own because I was still having some challenges, which then led into marriage counseling.
Right.
So then I was in marriage counseling for a bit, and then that stopped, and then it was basically post marriage, so the separation. So this counselor saw me from like when I was single to when I was dating someone to when I was engaged with someone to when I was married to someone to when I've been divorced with someone, and has literally seen me through all these steps, and has probably seen the closest 10, 15 people to me as well.
Right, yeah.
So knows me really well because he knows people around me as well. But it was quite the journey, man.
Right.
Quite the journey, because you'd go in with all sorts of issues, and she gives you tools. Okay, start working on this, try this, the nature bathing part, the meditating piece, all those things. Everything outside of taking medication.
Right.
And I found that to be very, very helpful because also when you're, in my opinion, when you're dealing with things like marital issues or relationship issues, if you start, you could talk to your friends about it, but a lot of times your friends are vested. So are the people around you. They're vested in you because you guys are now this big crew of people. So they're always going to have their biases as well. You're never truly going to get a third person 100%. Opinion, right? No, that's why if you're like sitting in a house and you're all living together, you get in a tip. It's like you sitting down with your sister-in-law, okay, now you go ahead and samjhota karo or whatever it is. It doesn't really work. So I found that third person was helpful in that sort of thing. And then the drinking part. Mm-hmm. So she helped me with that as well. And basically, when we approach that part of everything, the way that she positioned it was, she said, "You're not an alcoholic. Yeah, you don't have an addiction to alcohol." Mm-hmm. Okay, so she's like, we need to get that clear. But what you do have is a maladaptive coping mechanism. Okay, so she was basically positioning and saying that when I'm going through chaos, or when I was going through chaos with the marital issues and so forth, I was using alcohol to cope. Right. And that once I was able to pull myself out of the environment and then start work and remove the alcohol and everything, I was able to get my way out of it. So having, the guidance through that was extremely, extremely important.
Right. So when was your last therapy appointment? And walk me through that, because I hear that was a special one.
Yeah. Without giving too many details, I was basically, it was in 2020. Right, last year. Yeah, it was last year, and I went in. I had a session with her, so I had a psychedelic experience, where I'm not going to share details on. And then I basically went into a session after, and I went through this session where we talked about everything almost, like kind of what I got recapped everything, kind of recapped the drinking, recapped the relationship, the divorce, everything. Went through things. And by the end of it, she looked at me and basically said, I think you've graduated now from counseling. And she said, I don't think you need me anymore. She's like, now you have all the tools that you require in order to, take these ups and downs in life and be able to handle it on your own. If you need my help, if there's anything that I could do for you, don't hesitate, give me a call. And that's that. And I was like, whoa. Wow, really?
How special was that? It's like, sound like a surprise to you.
Yeah, because you would think that, wait a minute, I'm paying you.
Yeah, why? This is kind of counterintuitive.
You're basically telling me you don't want me to pay you anymore. Yeah. I thought they would just want to keep seeing you.
Right.
So when I heard that, I was a big, okay, there actually is a place that we can get to where the person kind of lets us off the training wheels and says, all right, waves you goodbye as you're biking down the road.
Crazy.
And then you're thinking, well, if I fall and something happens, then I'll be able to go back and she'll be able to help me.
Cheers to graduating therapy. So this person, which doesn't sound like has the best business model, because she's asking
She
you.
told me not to see her.
Stop giving me money,
Yeah,
because
exactly.
you're all better now. Which is probably a good time to now get into how do you find a good therapist, a therapist that's good for.
Yeah, I think at this point now, well, we have Google reviews,
Yeah.
right? So you could always check reviews. And then there's always recommendations from friends. That's always a good idea as well. But to be quite honest, to answer that question, like, I don't know, how would you answer that question?
For
Because
me-
like, I feel like I got
Yeah.
referred to someone and it just worked out so well.
Yeah.
And I didn't
Feel
have
like you
to
got
look
lucky?
further.
Yeah.
Yeah. I did go to marriage counseling with a separate counselor. It only lasted one session. It was the worst session I've
Yeah.
ever had.
Yeah.
And that person straight up was sitting across from me looking at me. And I said, yeah, you know, I was struggling with drinking and I quit. She looked at me. She's like, you quit cold turkey? Like emotional reactions.
Yeah.
She go, what do you mean?
Yeah.
You quit cold turkey? And like she was reacting to things and
Was
so forth.
she the same ethnic background as you?
Yeah, she was.
Yeah.
And so I was just like blown away because I was coming from my experiences with Anna, expecting another Anna.
Yeah.
And what I got was completely different.
Yeah.
And that's the moment I had. I thought to myself, well, Jas, what'd you expect?
Yeah.
You think every kin's the same?
Yeah, straight
You think
up.
every physio's the same?
Straight up.
You think every personal trainer is the same? No, they're not. They're all very different. So that experience didn't work out. So I think having a session with someone, or even before you book with them, figuring out what's their style.
Yeah.
What are things that they, abide by?
I think a big way you can do that, like with Anna, if you want to, what I do whenever I recommend Anna, I don't say go see this counselor. I tag them in one of her Instagram videos where she's talking, and you can clear as day see her style. And so they can make a judgment of themselves. Like, okay, they're probably going to scroll through a couple of videos. Okay, do they jive with her? Because she's totally about, healing through nature and finding, ways to give you the tools to heal the best and stuff like that. I heard of some therapists that, require you to come in pretty aggressively and stuff
Yeah.
like that, which just works for some people because they need that.
And then some do cognitive behavioral therapy,
Exactly.
CBT, and then there's a lot of like homework that kind of goes with that.
Absolutely.
So there's many different styles.
One thing I loved about Anna is that some people might not like this, but when I was in her session, she didn't take any notes while she was in the session because she's like, I want you to have my undivided attention. She's like, I don't want to get distracted writing something down and miss something that you're talking about. She's like, once you're done, I'm going to recap certain things, but I am going to be seeing you frequently enough where we're going to be able to touch on the same points. But that also leaves the ball in your court where you have to do some of this work. Otherwise, by the time you come back, if you both don't know what happened last session, you're kind of screwed. You haven't done the work, right? So I think a lot of it comes with just doing your homework with them, research them, go off Instagram, go off their Google reviews, and ask your peers, other people that have seen her or them, for that matter.
What are some points of criticism that you have for therapy, or when is it like you're kind of just using it and it's no longer like you're plateauing almost,
So
and it's not?
Yeah,
effective?
I think an issue with that is when you're not being completely forthcoming with what you're doing for therapy. If you're not going into therapy and you're not being completely honest and you're giving a biased point of view on a situation that's
or telling them
triggering you,
what they want to hear.
telling them what you want to
Oh,
hear,
you want
knowing
to
they you're going to elicit the response to reconfirm your bias, because that's borderline sociopathic. But we can all kind of get stuck in those little mannerisms, right? Where we're kind of telling people what we want to hear back from them. We're telling them a version of a story that will give you the response you want to hear. But that
Because sometimes people have this view in their mind,
Yeah.
and then they go to the counselor and they come back and say, "Oh, well, I talked to my counselor. She said I'm right."
Yeah,
Or
exactly.
they said that it's like this, and so it's kind of like, well, yeah, because the counselor's not going to sit there and tell you you're wrong.
because they're only dealing with the facts you're giving them.
Exactly.
But that's
so they
the
might not
other
have the
thing.
full story.
So and also they can reconfirm your biases if you're not being forthcoming, right? And it'll make it seem. And also, but if you are forthcoming and you are being unbiased when you're telling them what you're telling them, they may tell you you're wrong, and you have to be ready to hear that. You have to be ready to hear that you might be the problem in certain situations.
yeah.
And until you are ready to hear that, you're not ready for therapy. And that leads me to my second point. Not everyone is ready for therapy right now. As much as I want everyone in this room to go to therapy, they're at their stages in their healing process where sometimes you're not done feeling the pain.
Yeah.
You're not done seeing it through. I'm a big believer in see things through. Happiness, see it through to the end. Pain, see it through to the end.
Yeah.
Because if you cut that stuff short and you go to therapy and it's not really, you haven't seen it all till the end yet, you may come back to it. Unfinished business. I know I did on a couple of things. Which I won't divulge here, but like, yeah, there was certain issues that I was just not ready to kind of deal with just yet. And I brought them up. It was too soon, and it's just back into that hamster wheel. It's very easy to get stuck in the hamster wheel, right? And not until the hamster is ready to walk off is it going to walk off. If you try and stop it too soon, it's going to make its way back on and keep going.
Yeah, my points of criticism would be very similar to that. You open today's episode about boxing ourselves in and so forth. Well, some people like this term called learned helplessness, where you start to adapt the lifestyle of a depressed person and you start to identify yourself with those features. And you start to say things like, well, things just don't go good for me. I'm just the type of guy that is. And you start saying those things, putting them out there, making them real, and then being like, well, I'm just going to have to go to counseling for the rest of my life. This is just how I am. Yeah. And then they go to counseling, and then they kind of sometimes will elicit from the counselor the whole confirming of their thoughts and be like, oh, well, you know, it's so sad that you have to live like this and so forth. And it just gets deeper and deeper and deeper. And then by the end of it, you're basically like a professional depressed person who's, you know, going and seeing this person, seeing that person, and then it just becomes a part of you.
And they're comfortable with it. That's just a part of their identity.
Exactly. And then they're like the go-to expert on depression. So when someone's having a bad day, it's like, oh, hey, you've dealt with this. Oh, yeah, let me tell you. And then now you kind of, in a way, create an ego. Yeah. You create a role and an ego from that. You seek importance because you're like, oh, I have such a miserable life that when someone else is having issues, they come to me. Yeah. And I could be like, well, oh, yeah, you haven't had it as bad as me, and I'll make you feel better and so forth. And then another piece that we talked about, therapy is supposed to be used, or in my opinion, it's supposed to be used in conjunction with other pieces.
Absolutely.
Right? So like the physical fitness, the eating, having a... You could go to therapy all you want, but if you're eating McDonald's every day, and you have bad gut health, well, guess what? Your neurochemicals, they're just not going to balance. You could see Anna till the cows come home. Nothing's going to happen. And it all, in my opinion, what I've started to realize is life and everything is a big freaking puzzle.
Damn right.
And there's these small pieces, and they all have their role and their importance, and it stays at that. Definitely. And you can't blow it up and make the piece any bigger than it is. You can't make it any smaller because that's going to ruin the picture. Right? And
also, I want to add that it's okay to disagree with your therapist, but you can't just quietly disagree with them. You have someone you're with, and they ask you, she tells you, well, you should just leave that person. You don't agree with them, let her know that. I don't agree with that, and that's not a thing for me. Why would you say that? And then give her a choice. Give her a chance, to say, this is why I said that, and I'm sorry that if you felt that way, I'll retract that, and we'll talk about something. Or whatever her reasoning may be.
Right.
But you can't quietly disagree in therapy, nor should you just blindly agree with everything a therapist says, regardless of a therapist anybody says.
Yeah, they're human as well, and so they should have to explain, hey, well, what was your reasoning behind that?
Exactly.
Or what was their thought process that brought you to that conclusion?
Sometimes we just sit there as the armchair, patient, and we just kind of let everything go, take everything, like we're programmed with doctors, take everything at face value, to process it, move on from it, and then be like, I got to deal with this now. Yeah. But no, you disagree with them. That's part of the process as well. And just understand that, like, most people just got to get that, like, it's a lot bigger in your head than it is in real life.
Yeah.
Right?
And I also feel like, before you think counseling, this catastrophic thing has to go wrong. I don't feel like that anymore.
No.
I feel like if you could be having a bad month or so, or you could be overworking. Yeah. You could have like these small things going on, nothing catastrophic, and you could still go see a counselor, and it's a benefit. Definitely. In my opinion, it's kind of like working out.
Definitely.
Right? It's exercise for the brain in order to kind of toughen you up in that sense. Is it expensive?
Yeah, stuff is not cheap.
No, it's not, but there's ways around that. 100%. So there is that sliding scale for some counselors.
Definitely.
And then some, like when we saw Anna, she was doing the practical, so she was free. So then you can always access people
But
there.
I'll tell you this, it's expensive to do, but it's a hell of a lot more expensive to not take care of your mental health.
100%. Yeah.
You'll make less money, you'll be less, pleasing to be around. I know I was becoming that. And it's a quick way to become isolated from other people is to just not deal with your stuff.
What's your message to Indian men that usually say, well, I don't need counseling? Or because I tend to find that a lot. Yeah. There's a lot of, or men in general.
I'll give you an example because I think I've said this to a man in this exact same scenario. Or actually, no, I thought it, but I didn't want to embarrass the guy to say it. Why do you think you're so special? Why do you think your problems are so special that, you can just deal with them yourself? When are we going to get off of the ego horse and realize I can't take care of everything? You know what the worst thing is? When someone needs therapy or they have issues that they have going on and they see a little bit of success in their life.
Mm.
When they see success, they start making a lot of money and all this stuff happens.
Sounds fine.
They validate everything that's going on in their life is the recipe for their success. So they just hunker down and this is the way they are. This is the way their life's going to be. And because I've made more money doing it this way. And so those people, you can't tell them nothing. But what I would tell them, get off your high horse. You will start losing people in your life. It's not going to be pretty. You will start losing money. It's not going to be pretty. You're going to start losing your standing in society or whatever it is that bloats up your ego, and it's not going to be pretty. And at that point, you're probably not even going to realize therapy could have helped.
Right.
You're going to blame it on something existential, something spiritual, something God had written, the mystical creature up in the clouds. Like, come on.
Mm-hmm.
Get off your high horse. Deal with your stuff. If you got kids, you all the more reason to do it because you're going to be creating that vicious cycle for them.
Yeah. And I think there's a lot of couples as well that, marriage counseling can be very, very helpful because some of them probably sit there and they end up suffering in silence and so forth. So if anybody's listening to this and your significant other has been like, maybe we should, this is probably the prompt from the universe for you to
just do it.
To just do it.
Just do it. And
any final words, Amber? Amber.
I'm speechless.
There's a lot.
Yeah.
It just went off.
No, but it was very relatable because I'm also someone who goes through a lot of mental health stuff, and Ben knows this for a fact. He's seen me at times where I've been really at my worst, I would say, and he's suggested he's suggested counseling. So I was like, oh no, I don't want to do it. Because it's like I tried it, didn't find anyone I connected with. And I was like, I don't want to keep going to someone and then being like, there's nothing. I'm wasting a time again.
Yeah.
I went, I really enjoyed my session. I cried, not expecting to. We started picking things that I didn't even think was a problem.
Yeah.
And she's like, no, this is it. And I was like, oh, okay. So now whatever I've been thinking is actually not a problem.
Nice.
I just made it up.
Yeah.
This is actually my problem. So I thought that was really cool because then it okay, I'm going to focus on this one thing. And then from there, it helped little things. I'm not saying I'm, better, I'm perfect, all this stuff. It's like, now it just kind of narrowed it down.
Right. How long has it been going on for you? How long have you been seeing a therapist?
Now I don't know, like a few months now.
A few months now?
Yeah,
Okay.
it's still early, but it's still. I'm now figuring it out. Before I would just deal with it on my own. I would never tell anybody, and they'd be like, "Go see someone." I'm like, "No, I haven't." I would always think I was special. I can deal with myself.
Yeah.
That was literally me.
Yeah.
And now I'm like, okay, maybe I'm not special, and I actually do need to see somebody. But now that I have, it's nice, and I can openly say that it's actually worth it.
You have a safe space where you can kind of deal with.
Yeah.
And that's the other thing. We think that therapy. I'm not perfectly healed yet or whatever.
Yeah.
You're not going to be.
Yeah.
You're going to be a better version of yourself that's going to love yourself and learn to deal with you.
Yeah.
But you're not going to be at a point, I don't think that's what life is, where you're just like, God, I don't have any more problems.
It's just you're going to get a better understanding of it. Now you're like, okay, now I know what's happening and I know what to do with it.
So now when I see it coming,
I know what to do.
I have coping mechanisms.
Yeah.
I'm good.
I'm not fearing yourself of what's going to happen. You're just like, oh, I'm scared. Now you're like, okay, let me face it.
Straight up.
So... But overall, really well said, guys.
So we'll obviously in the description put our therapist recommendations in there. But again, goes without saying, reach out to the boys. You can reach out to us at any point. Even if you just, again, need us to be the starting point for you.
Yeah.
We would love to be that starting point for you if you're not ready for therapy yet or anything like that.
Come talk to us.
I'll let the boys, man. We're easy to find.
And for anybody that has any feedback, whether it's critical, negative, positive, doesn't matter. Send us a message, please.
We want to hear it all. My last feedback was that I dropped too many F-bombs and...
We tried to correct that. We only had
This is why I have this, right?
We'll beep it every time.
But yeah, we're works in progress as well. So please give us all your feedback, and we'd love to hear about your therapy experiences. So again, DM us, post it on your story, do whatever you got to do.
Thanks for listening.
Holla at us, man. Cheers, guys.
Oh, cheers.
Can I do without that?